Good evening, treasure seekers. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me as always from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
Good. We have some big news in our household. After I don't even know how many countless hours we've podcasted, Cody has finally invested in a desk chair. Leveled up to some lumbar support. Um, and the best part of this is he purchased this on Amazon at a low price point. However, when he unboxed it, it came with white gloves for assembly.
It's very fancy.
White gloves. When I saw the text from you that was describing it, I just saw the preview, right? So I was like, "Ooh, it came with white glove assembly service." Like somebody came into your house and built it for you. That's a fancy chair. No, you had your own white glove assembly service, I guess.
Just the gloves, just very tiny gloves. So I had little webbed fingers as I'm trying to assemble everything. It wasn't a particularly oily chair or anything, so it's just more difficult with the gloves.
Yeah, I need to know at what point someone decided, you know what, let's up this experience a little bit and throw in some very small white gloves.
Yes.
A choice was made.
Very, very fancy chair. I did just discover apparently these armrests slide out very fast. I just discovered that during the intro music of this podcast.
Don't fiddle with them too much.
I'll try not to.
Yeah, you can press a lever and just like drop below the desk.
Cool. I don't think we have any news today, so should we just dive straight into our horseshoes and hand grenades?
Yes.
All right. I will be covering horseshoes and hand grenades today. Of course, it's focused on the past and future box. My personal favorite.
I'm so disappointed.
Why? You want Pokemon box?
I want us all to work as a team on Pokemon box, and nobody's teaming up with me.
I will try once I get a little bit of time on my hands. Hopefully, unfortunately, it's not next week.
Yeah, never.
Because I'm traveling 5 of the 7 days next week. So unfortunately, it's not boots on the ground for the treasure. It's for work. So anyway, hopefully I have some airplane reading material. Maybe I'll work on the Pokemon box.
Yes, please.
All right. So yeah, this is not really a fleshed out horseshoes and hand grenades, more of a concept that I'm hoping people that have more experience with Excel maybe can comment on. I know, Bryn, you have mentioned Excel because it's mentioned in the chapter. You haven't really had, I guess, satisfaction of solves you've seen that are using necessarily maybe specialized function of Excel. To me, it's like, I don't know if it's specialized function and if the mention of Excel is necessarily a clue that putting the word search into Excel just helps you maybe find the words, find the anagrams, find the other messages in there, or if there is more purpose to that Excel clue in terms of functionality. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Bryn? Or did I state them okay?
I think if he's directly stating Excel just to have us put it into a computer to be able to manipulate it easily, that would be very lame. I will go on the record of saying that, like, for how strong I think clues need to be in such a short, especially in the part 2 boxes, like there's only so much text to work with to provide a pretty significant amount of clues. And if you're going to just throw in Excel as just like, oh, maybe you can manipulate it a little bit easier, that feels incredibly underwhelming to me. So I think there needs to be something. I mean, it's even like, I don't know, the way it's emphasized, there has to be something specific to Excel, either that be in its function, or if we go back to the very beginning, like an Excel Easter egg, something along those lines.
Cody, what are your thoughts? Do you think it has to be something to do with advanced Excel, or do you think that's going too far?
I'm of two minds on it. Because on one hand, I agree with Bryn. And again, this all kind of sparked from just that one sentence in the book, and everyone really took it and ran with it. They're like, oh, that means you have to do this in Excel, and there's something special about Excel. He says in the book, paraphrasing, says it's something I'm sure you'll excel at. And so everyone says, okay, we're doing Excel, and Excel's got to be important. So I guess for the purposes of this conversation, assuming that that's true, and he is directing us to use Excel, it's tough. And I'm of two minds, like I said, because on one hand, I would agree that if he's purposely telling us to use Excel, there should be some functionality of Excel that like would be the reason why he's instructing us to use it. But on the other hand, I think that getting into any real, I'm kind of an Excel guy, and I like Excel a lot, and I like working in it. And I feel like getting into any of those, like what I think of as fun tricks and formulas and things,
Right.
for a lot of people, that would like kind of break the spirit of the rule of like, oh, you don't have to be a genius. And I mean, on one hand, it's not, you don't have to be a genius for Excel stuff, but it's definitely would quickly get out of the realm of like what you could expect someone who's got even just a modicum of experience with Excel to be used to doing. So I don't know. I could see it being like a conditional formatting thing where, you know, it's like in the upper ribbon and it's a one button click, and you can conditionally format it so it changes the color of the grid based on the values in each cell. I could see something like that. But if it starts getting to like nested functions, then it starts feeling like, I don't know that that's as approachable for everyone.
Right.
I don't think it's even going to be something as complex. I mean, even if it's just like being able to use like the O's as coordinates or something, like this O is in this column and this row, and you get like a letter and a number out of it. I think it's going to just be something as simple as that. So if you can get these like coordinates, Excel coordinates, based off of certain things in the word search, and like maybe use those letters and those numbers in a certain way. Like that's kind of where I see this going. And I guess maybe in my mind, like those coordinates then apply to some board game or some video game in a similar way. I don't think it's going to be Excel heavy. I just think there has to be a reason why it's in Excel if that's what we're supposed to do.
You know, I like that a lot. I think maybe, yeah, that's a good point. I think I was getting blinders on for actual, like, when we say functionality, like real functionality type things. But yeah, there, if we're supposed to reference, like you said, like column letters and row numbers, because it's something that's built into Excel that's really not, it doesn't have anything to do with the functionality, then yeah, that kind of fulfills both of my two takes on it. So I like that. And I also haven't thought about that like James Bond-esque Excel game in a while. I still feel like that could play a role in the solve.
The Spy Hunter
it kinda,
Easter egg.
Yeah, the Spy Hunter Easter egg. It ticked a lot of boxes of like old game in Excel, Easter egg reference, all that kind of stuff. Very, very Ready Player One-esque as well.
Right. An Easter egg. What Cody's referring to is there was a Spy Hunter, which is a classic arcade game, video game. There was an Easter egg built into Excel, into one of the older versions. I'm not exactly sure which one, but if you Google Spy Hunter Easter egg Excel, you'll come across it immediately. And you can see a YouTube video of that in a couple places. So yeah, I do like the Easter egg concept because of the Ready Player One connections, like you said, Cody. My Horseshoes and Hand Grenades today is not about the coordinates, but that was my first go-to as well, is thinking about letters that appear at a certain coordinate in Excel. I've done that with the O's. There's too many J's and K's and F's and not enough vowels to like make a message out of the O's that are left over, or even the O's generally, in my opinion. So that's not what this Horseshoes and Hand Grenades is about, but it is more about the advanced functionality, so you're going to hate it. All right, let me start. So
I will say, I think an argument could be made for advanced functionality because of the theme of this box. It's like digital, we were talking about Bitcoin, like the future digital. And so I think, if each box is supposed to appeal to a certain type of people, I mean, I think he could have a box that is appealing to the computer savvy person. So I wouldn't say that's just like totally out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first one is pivot tables. And I am not an Excel guru by any stretch of the imagination and don't know how to use pivot tables. Other than I took the word search and put it into a pivot table and saw what it spits out here. So this is one example of what happens when you put it in a pivot table. Basically, you see the top row of letters in the Excel on the right-hand side here, and then you can click them on and off. And get the letters in some orientation below those rows, and you start to see some of the word search words. They're a little bit scrambled here because I haven't put these necessarily in the right order, but basically I've selected lilac, the lilac column, and you can see peaks here, for example, in the first one. So I am not a pivot table guru. Is there some way that you can modify this to get other words out of the word search that are not linear, let's say, depending on maybe you put the top row in alphabetical order, or some other approach? I feel like with the Mad Magazine approach, we would have seen maybe some combination that's similar to this. But that's the first thing that came to mind in terms of advanced functionality of Excel that I hear people talk about all the time is pivot tables. And I don't know if you guys have any experience with that.
No.
Okay.
I just remember in one of my first jobs being asked to do something with a pivot table, and that's about as far as that went. So
Okay.
would imagine the least savvy in Excel of the three of us, which is funny because I am the most adamant that we need to be doing something. So I can just harp on it and can't do much. But I would say like pivot tables was certainly something that came to mind when I was thinking through like what's a possibility as well. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm not one to be able to put that into application.
So I'm a little confused looking at what you were just showing there. So
Okay.
to create that, did you highlight, you like put it in as the 15 by 20 grid, highlighted it, and then just selected out of the ribbon, like create pivot table, and this is what it spat out?
Yeah. Yeah. It spat out something more complex, and I checked and unchecked some of the boxes to make it a little simpler in this case. But yeah, it's basically using the columns. Actually, it's using the first row of the word search as the columns that I can select here, and then it spits out all the letters that come below those, and now what these columns are. So yeah, it's not great. I have more that I'm more excited about. So the second Excel functionality that caught my eye was something called a upset plot. And that is interesting because right before the Excel sentence, there is a "don't be upset at me if it's too easy."
I like this. I like where this is headed.
So it seems more interesting to me, honestly. This is an example of an upset plot function in Excel. Basically, what it does is it tries to make correlations between a table that you've generated. For example, here there is a list of movies and designated whether or not they're crime movies. And then it makes connections that are they crime fantasy movies? Are they crime drama movies? Are they crime thriller movies? And then counts up all of those things individually and then the pairwise comparison. And as you get more and more advanced, the triplets and beyond, however far you want to take this. So this is called an upset plot. And I feel like because the upset keyword, this might be more interesting in trying to correlate different letters. If I can get the upset plot functionality working, maybe there's something to draw out of that between the letter frequencies. Again, that's as far as I have taken it, which is not far at all because it's a little intimidating to try to get this functionality working. So basically, it's a call to the audience, maybe if somebody else has been thinking about this or if somebody else is like expert in Excel, Is there any way to make something useful out of either of these two approaches? I'd be very curious to hear.
I am particularly intrigued by this upset because, I mean, they come right after each other in the chapter too.
Right.
Something you would excel at, just don't be upset at me. And the upset at me has to have a meaning. Like it's just not a weird little throwaway sentence he's putting in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that a lot. My only hesitation would be he's saying don't be upset with me if it's too easy. And I would think the common person probably is not familiar with an upset table.
Right.
But I don't know. I also could just not be great in Excel, and maybe this isn't my chapter.
Anyway, so
sorry, I was just gonna say the terminology there just really is right on the nose, right? With the Excel and the upset. I like that a lot. Definitely worth looking into this a little bit more. My immediate concern is twofold. One, if you're treating every character in that grid as a different variable, the number of how do you make those connections, and the number of connections seems like it would go kind of off the charts pretty quickly.
Right.
And then my second concern is, what output data are we going to get, and how is that going to be useful? Because it looks like it's going to be just like a diminishing graph there, right? Is that would pretty much always be it's like a frequency or distribution graph.
Yeah.
And that would always be the result no matter what your data putting into it is. So yeah, again, kind of two minds there, where one's super excited about the terminology and the other one's a little worried about the sliding hand rests.
I mean, it also could be suggesting a different type. Like if someone that was savvy and be like, oh, I recognize upset table, and maybe that would then prompt you to think through what are the other types of functions to then be applying. Because if he's going to try to slip in a function into the language, I would imagine there's pretty limited function names that you could just like integrate into this scenario.
Right. No, I'm not particularly pleased with this. I think it's maybe more of a call for help from the audience to see if somebody has some bright ideas. So throwing out the concepts, I don't want people to go down too much of a rabbit hole unless it seems like there's something there that could be used to associate the letters in some combination that we haven't thought of yet. And I doubt that it's going to use the whole word search. I think it's going to be something to do with maybe that block of 10 at the bottom. That's, we say join or rule bend NT, which I think is a little unsatisfying to a lot of people. Or maybe the corners or something like that. I think it would be very difficult for Jon Collins-Black to do what he's done so far with what we are confident in is pretty good solves with the individual words themselves and the anagram. And then also build in some sort of functionality that's the whole word search, in my opinion. So anyway, happy to hear feedback. If people think this is way too deep, that's perfectly fine. I don't think we'd be opposed to that. But if somebody has a bright idea based on using Excel functionality, particularly the upset plot, in some useful way, I'd be more than happy to hear that from the audience.
Cody and I saw that I don't know what the title is, the Excel Championship was on. Is that what it was on, like ESPN?
Yeah, I think it's garnered some attention the past few years.
I need to track down an expert from there to help in my resourcefulness of tracking out experts.
Yes, please feel free to start emailing out. What would you do at this word search and a pivot table? Cool. So yeah,
like
sorry that's not fleshed out, and it's not like I've gone as far as a lot of your guys' horseshoes and hand grenades recently in terms of a negative result, because I haven't even gotten that far yet. But I wanted to throw that out there just because it's a little intimidating to me.
I like it. I think it's very good, and it continues to bring up, in my opinion, a very good point that there needs to be an Excel component to the solve.
Mhm.
So I'm always happy to resurface that argument.
Cool. All right, mailbag.
Mailbag. We've got mail.
All right, I got 3 rapid fire mailbags on a variety of subjects. So hopefully everybody will have a little tidbit in here that is interesting. We'll start with an email from Chad, and really likes Cody. I like your idea of a roadmap. The amount of research that Cody puts in is amazing. I'm offended. Sorry, that's my commentary. The one problem is that there are simply too many places mentioned, and there'd have to be a way to ignore the extra ones. A solution that might work is once you find your starting place, you begin to look only for possible routes from that location. For example, if my starting spot was Tampa, there are only 2 main highways that I would be able to take from there, I-75 or I-4. So I would look for those numbers, and then next a city that the highway takes me to, like Orlando, possibly getting a route through the whole book. End of email. What do you think about that, Cody? I like it a lot.
I'm flattered. I thought that we did one, I can't remember the exact episode now at this point, but I thought we did one where we looked at different cities and states that had been brought up and classified them in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did some specific classifications, like I think it was like city name, comma, abbreviated state.
Right.
We started like being able to get different groups of how they were mentioned in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to be a lot more manageable, like groups of like 6 to 10 or 12. So I liked that approach. And I liked that we got it down to more manageable sizes. And it also I also feel like answered some question about why he phrases things differently at different places in the book, even though it's, city, state, city, state, city, state. Sometimes he'll abbreviate the states, sometimes he won't. And the whole thing also with like the whole roadmap and trying to come up with different ways to kind of limit so we're not just all over the place. 2 other things that kind of came to my mind while you were reading that email is one, I guess, yeah, going to going state to state, but only states that like touch, maybe.
Okay.
And then the other thought that's been going through my head, and I feel like this is just a weird thought to even be having, but I've had it a few times now at this point, and so I just want to mention it. And it's kind of like the other day when I mentioned the poem from the Statue of Liberty, even though it wasn't really connected to anything. It's just something that wouldn't stop swimming around in my head, so I wanted to get on record in case it ended up being important in the future. It's kind of the same thing here. All of the the road maps and talking about like traveling from one place to another keeps reminding me of like this famous, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like this famous math discovery and thought experiment that generally has to do with like a series of islands and a series of bridges, and each like island has one bridge connecting to another island, and you can end up figuring out like if it's possible to make one complete route and cross every bridge without going back over yourself. And there's like a mathematical, I mean, it's not even a very complex mathematical function, but it was just like if there's an even number of bridges and an odd number of islands or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
that then it's possible and then it's not. And I don't know why, I don't know if that's related in any way, but it's something that as we talk about the roadmaps and kind of trying to limit things and kind of interesting third party things that keep swimming around in my head. So I wanted to mention that too.
Okay.
I don't know if I really answered the question.
That's okay.
I rambled.
I like the approach because it creates a structured way to be using all of these numbers. Well, not necessarily all, but it creates some structure around the use of the numbers because of how frequently they're used. And so, yeah, like the highways, I mean, maybe there's other like ways to be thinking about the numbers too. But yeah, as a connection point, I like it a lot.
I do too. Just thinking about this live after I read the question, to your point, Bryn, think about the old road atlases that you had where you had a city and then another city and a road. In between those, it would tell you the mileage between those two cities. So that'd be another way to get potential numbers out of that approach, I would say. And that would be very specific in terms of you would know you're on the right track if you get 2 in a row, basically, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Do you think that if it's getting that specific on an atlas, do you think that, I mean, is that like universal knowledge across all atlases? Or are they all doing their own measurements? I mean, if it's like, if you're going from like a city to another city and getting it down to like a tenth of a mile, it feels like the kind of thing where an atlas could, 2 different atlases could be showing slightly different things.
Yeah, it's never a tenth of a mile in the old atlases. It was rounded to the nearest mile. I think you would get the same functionality out of Google Maps as well. But just that old school approach of going city to city, the resolution there is the individual mileages, and then you would do some math to calculate the mileage of your whole route. But I think that I like this has sparked some ideas, I think, here from Chad.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just like a good, anytime I can find an opportunity to go back to just like using what is in the book in a clever way. I think that's usually what I think to be the strongest for solve potential.
Yeah, I think there's one detriment to this approach in that if it's too specific, then it would be one key basically to maybe get you to a location, which doesn't seem particularly satisfying, but maybe it sets up at least one solved clue that you can combine with some of the other information in the book. So
yeah, I agree that like one method alone will not get you to the location. So it would just be a component of a solve.
All right. Cool. So thank you for that, Chad. Very, very helpful. The second email from Margie. She says, I really appreciate all of the research that Bryn does. I lied. She didn't say that. You referred you referred to the bracelet colors. So this is about our unbreakable thread. You referred to the bracelet colors in the book being red, yellow, blue, and green. Those are also the Olympic ring colors.
Ooh.
Minus black, which I believe represent all nations flag colors. That's it. But I thought that was cool. I thought that was good because we talked about the bracelet at the very end of that last episode and didn't really have a conclusion for that. But maybe it's an Olympic nod because that bracelet was very specifically placed and never mentioned.
This is the bracelet in Unbreakable Thread?
Our Unbreakable Thread, yes.
Yeah, and if you go back and look at those beads on the bracelet, like some of them almost are like rings instead of solid. So I thought that was kind of a nice little touch with that too.
Have you guys listened to Treasures Galore, that episode?
Mm-hmm.
Where he emailed the illustrator, and she said she didn't get any information from Jon Collins-Black. She got information from the art director. It wasn't very clear in those emails that Treasures Galore shared that she got how much direction she got at all. The important thing was that she said a lot of the artwork is reflective of her background. So some of the toys and things that she painted or watercolored into those images were from her background. And another example she gave was the scene where the kid is riding the bicycle down the street in front of the apartments. Like that's where she lives. So one thing comes to mind of that is the telescope on the roof, which I think we pointed out as being potentially a reference to Jon Collins-Black with the telescope on the minivan. And is that a coincidence or not? I think there's room maybe for more questions to the illustrator about that, about how much direction she was getting, if any at all, or if that is truly a coincidence. So another question we could ask is about that bracelet, is that something that's, from her childhood, or was that some sort of direction that was inserted in there? I tend to lean towards the former now, based on the email exchange that Treasures Galore had with the artist, but I don't know. I liked the connection that Margie made there.
I would say the main caveat to all of this for me is that in the email exchange that Treasures Galore had with the illustrator, I mean, she was explaining the scenario to him as like a standard illustrator publisher dynamic. However, I do think there's a whole different layer of complexity here, being that Marble Press is Jon Collins-Black's publishing company. So I think where traditionally a publisher might not have their hand in the art direction given by the art director, I think this is probably a small enough publishing company that Jon Collins-Black owns. And so I think if he wants to be telling the art director to pass along something, I think that's a lot more feasible in this scenario than it would be at a traditional publisher. So I don't know, like some of the things that were being dismissed, I don't know if that's a little hasty, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know, and I don't remember it. I was working on some other stuff and listening to the podcast at the same time. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd be very interested to know how much direction the artist was given in general, even though she kind of said that it didn't come, none really came directly from JCB. Whoever it was from, was it pretty hands off, or did she get a lot of advice or pushing, nudging in one direction or another, and to what extent and to what level of detail?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more to dig into there if we want to. But yeah, let's say we email and she comes back and says she was free to do whatever she wanted based on the manuscript that was provided by Jon Collins-Black, which is the text. Would that, I think that would be a helpful response in my mind.
Yeah.
And then it would be very unsatisfying if some artwork in the book led to the clue, because then it was Jon retroactively going back and saying, yeah, this was a clue. And then that would be sad. So then I think we would just focus on the book jacket and information and maybe the text if we wanted to, not necessarily the art.
I don't know if it would be sad.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, Brent, I kind of cut you off there, but I don't know if it would be sad. Does a clue have to start off with the intent of being a clue to be a valid clue? I mean, if you see something retroactive, like, hey, this happens to match perfectly, and then say, hey, there's also a clue in there.
Well, the way that he stated it was like, because that these were coming out at similar times, he decided to go back and like happen to throw in a clue or two. So it implies that he made a change. And also it feels to me kind of shady to just take something that's already there and be like, oh, now it's a clue by chance.
Yeah, you convinced me.
I think there has to be the intent. I was also going to say we have the evidence that there is Photoshop manipulation to the illustrations as well. So that opens a whole different can of worms. Even if she received no direction, those files were handed off and they could have been edited after the fact.
So that would be super helpful to ask her about the bracelet, ask her about the telescope on the roof. Like, did she do those things? Was she directed to do those things? Or were they from her own fruition?
I'd also be interested to know from her or from any artists or illustrators in general, if you're like paid for a job and you hand over the illustrations to a book, if you were then to see that book later and something minor has changed, would you be like, what the heck? Why would you mess with my art? Or would you be like, they bought this, I did a job, they bought it, they're free to do whatever they want with it. It's their files now at this point.
I think it's
good to know.
Yeah.
I need to go back, and I don't want to misquote Rashawn now, but Rashawn actually has published a children's book. Rashawn has written into our mailbag a few times. So Rashawn has, he self-published a children's book, but he did go through the process of trying to do it through a traditional publishing route first. And so he was able to provide some interesting insight into that dynamic between the illustrator and the publisher and all those hoops. And I want to say that what he was telling us, it sounds like the illustrator really does not have much control or doesn't have much rights to like what they're handing off. Basically, anything could be done with it. And I really hope I'm not misspeaking now. But if I'm remembering the email correctly, it was like the illustrator really doesn't have much say in things.
Yeah,
Like they're kind of just contracted out. They do their work. It's handed off, and that's that.
Yeah, that'd be my guess on how that works. Is basically the contract is probably very clear that once the artwork is handed off, like we can modify this as much as we want. That'd be my guess. But let's try to dig into that a bit more. And if you want to double check for Sean's email. Anyway, I think reaching out to the illustrator, Nicole Giselle, one more time maybe would be helpful. All right.
I have Rashawn's email here if you want me to read a couple of the bullet points.
Sure, let's do that.
He says, while the illustrator may not have had direct contact with Jon, the manuscript definitely would have had initial notes for the illustrator. And then the editor, who would be an employee of the publishing company and or the author, absolutely would give feedback and request adjustments to the artwork.
Okay.
In my experience, an illustrator is generally not given free rein for their own artistic expression, i.e. they can't demand things be left out or left unchanged, nor can they get upset if things get changed. While the illustrator is credited, the publisher usually owns the intellectual property and can do whatever they want with it, in my experience.
Okay. Interesting.
I deal with contracts sometimes at work, and the bullet point of "nor can they get upset" is funny to me as part of a contract.
Thou shalt not get too upset if it's too easy.
This contract says you're not allowed to be upset.
Writing that into any contracts moving forward.
All right. Yeah, I was a little shocked, I won't lie, by the email exchange that Treasures Galore had. Because it's like, you can't just give the amount of text that Jon gave and just come up with art. In my mind, it doesn't seem like there's enough constraints on it. So Rashawn's, and I know we're playing a big game of telephone here right now, but Rashawn's comments about there has to be some sort of notes to the illustrator of what, at least concepts, seems very reasonable to me, other than otherwise coming up with just however you want to make this book flow on your own seems a little intense.
I mean, that's like the entire job of an art director in this scenario, right? Is to come up with an artistic vision. And I'm not going to go as far as to say to storyboard it, because I think that probably gets into concepting of the illustrator and stepping on toes there. But at least like creating a general idea for each page, I would believe they'd be briefed in page by page.
Okay. All right. I think that's enough speculation from us until we get some better answers. Third email from D Nice. She has been holding one close to her chest for months now, but wanted to share it with us. Yay. And for you to share with the followers if you see fit. So that's why we're sharing it here. I believe Will's straight edge from Joy's Serenade is referring to page 161. So let me pull that up real quick. Here. Halfway down, you'll see Goodwill on the left. Directly above it is a perfectly straight horizontal line that goes across the entire page and into the next page. I can tell you there is no other page that has this texture. I've attached the picture with the page, which we're looking at now. You can see that crease, basically, that goes from one end of the page to the other horizontally. Looking into it deeper, I started playing around with this line of words and eventually came up with using the first letter of each word. WPIT, WTCB are both FM radio stations. TMEA is the Texas Music Educators Association in Austin. What do we do with this? I have no idea, but looking at the second line of the poem, tone of a tune, so Joy's Serenade, tone of a tune, that screams radio station to me. I naturally then looked at radio stations called The Sun, Moulton, and the most prominent one just so happens to be in Austin. So I thought there was a lot of good observations here with this line being unique to the book And I really like the tone of a tune because of that radio station connection. I thought that was super cool. So, anyway, food for thought there. I also don't know what to do with that necessarily, other than I thought it was a creative concept. Might be a bit of a stretch in my mind, but tone of a tune really caught my eye, so I really like that part of it.
I mean, in my head, I kind of jump to chapter 1 as well with the Scotty device.
Yeah, the frequencies. Yep.
Yeah, the frequencies there. So that I guess I'm in the same boat of I think it's really good. I like that it's using a unique aspect of these backgrounds. I mean, even if I believe these were the backgrounds we found that Scott found on Shutterstock, but I think that's totally fair if you're going to use that particular straight edge background in this context and line it up with that line. That's I don't think that is discredited at all if it's a stock image.
Right. It'd be interesting.
I like it.
It'd be interesting to know if that stock image is bigger and like he could shift it up or down to fit a particular section of that. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Shall we dive into Discord detectives? That's the horizontal one, right? Okay. Cody, you got Discord detectives today.
You betcha. And it's a Pokemon box one.
Ooh.
So
I'm all ears.
I'm very interested to hear Bryn's thoughts on it after we go through it here. This one comes from the Reddit, one of the Reddits, the r/treasure inside Reddit. And this one's by flashy-grapefruit 785, who appears to be a very frequent poster on the Reddit. I read through some of their stuff. I have varying degrees of on board with some of their takes, but I really liked this one. So this one is has to do with the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans. So the first thing they talk about in their post is their, oh gosh, I hope I don't pronounce this wrong. I've only ever really read the Pokemon stuff, not had to say it out loud. But the Cerulean Cave, which is where Mewtwo is found.
Cerulean is how I've been reading that.
Cerulean, yes.
Okay.
I think that's right. I was saying it to myself earlier, and I think that was what I was saying, and it was correct. So Cerulean Cave, that's where Mewtwo is found. Obviously, we've got the Mewtwo in the photo at the end of the Pokemon box. Cerulean is a word that means blue, which I actually, I don't think I knew that. So they brought up in their post, really there's strong ties to like blue and cave. If you want to pull up the first picture,
sure,
that I sent you, Blake, which I pulled right off the Reddit post. All three of the pictures I'm going to show are actually just directly from the Reddit post. So this is a plaque that's at this Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans. One of their rooms here called the Blue Room, Blue. And I found the first and I think fourth paragraph particularly interesting in here. So the first paragraph on the plaque is talking about the Blue Room and says, behind these ornate gold doors, the Blue Room came into being on New Year's Eve, 1935, and soon became America's premier nightclub, featuring the big bands of Glenn Miller and Guy Lombardo, as well as top entertainers, including Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Peggy Lee, Tina Turner, and Ella Fitzgerald, to name a few. So it seems like there's kind of the jazzy connections there. But then the one I really like is this fourth paragraph talking about further talking about the Blue Room. Below the Blue Room is the location which was housed what is believed to be the first nightclub in America, The Cave, a subterranean supper club with waterfalls, streams, stalactites, and gnome-like faces. The club opened in 1908 and presented lavish musical oh gosh, I don't know what that word is. Reviews. I've read that paragraph a bunch of times. I just skipped over that word, I guess. Stage acts and Dixieland bands. So the fact that, Blue Room, the fact that this place was called The Cave, had waterfall streams, stalactites, and gnome-like faces, especially the gnome-like faces, just seems like so on the nose, hitting the nail on the head with what we're what we're looking at in the Pokemon box.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. They also noted in the post that Roosevelt Hotel, before it was remodeled and expanded, was originally 6 stories tall.
Oh,
Oh, that was
6
gonna
stories
be
tall.
my question.
If you want to start opening up the photo called Roosevelt 2,
sure.
they mentioned that on page 219, he says the forest opened up, an eagle greeted us from high above. The hotel was originally named Grunwald, which means green forest in German. And then as you walk in for reception, there's this big golden eagle. So again, it says the forest opened up, an eagle greeted us from high above. Seems like lines up pretty well with this in German green forest hotel, and then the eagle above.
That's awesome.
If you want to pull up the next photo, the bar in the hotel has this floor. For the listeners, it looks very similar to
Wow.
the back of the coin for the Pokemon box.
That's good.
And then the last one of their points that I really liked, is across the street, there's 2 businesses. One's called the Hollywood Spa, and the other one's called the Half Shell. So obviously, Half Shell lines up with a whole bunch of stuff that we've talked about. Then the Hollywood Spa, he says I believe it's when he's in the hotel, he says he looks out the window and sees halfway to the stars. So they had a few other bullet points in there as well that I found slightly less convincing. So I'm not going to touch on those, but those are the 4 that I found. There's small holes I can poke in a couple of them, but there's definitely I don't know. There's a lot to like about that solve. And I really find that 4th paragraph of that plaque is one of the more intriguing things I've seen. And even if it's just even if it's correct enough to be a starting location for something, that's not nothing. So I think it's really interesting. I like a lot of the points there. So Bryn, interesting to hear your take.
I think it's really interesting. I guess first of all, I would say I don't think any clue would be tied to a business name. So I think those 2 businesses across the street would just be coincidence. I think argument against that would be if it was something incredibly historic and has been there forever and it's probably not going anywhere. Then that's, I would say, fair game. I guess when I like all these connections, I just think, first of all, even if it's a starting point, I have a hard time with a starting point or a solve location being a specific location mentioned in the book, or in the story. So if it's in New Orleans or if it's in Houston, why is he telling us the rest of this route and that it's somewhere off the route or close by to their route? I feel like that is kind of just maybe an argument against that would be if there's a component that's important to the circle that he's mentioning that the route is, and you're supposed to be using one of these as a starting point. But yeah, if it's this hotel and then I guess it would be a starting point and then you keep going from there because it is at the beginning of the story. Yeah, it's there's a lot of good coincidences there.
What do you think about a subterranean nightclub called The Cave with waterfalls, streams, stalactites, and gnome-like faces?
I think it's intriguing. I'm not sold.
The gnome-like faces, Cody, is that because of Anvari's ring, or sorry, gnome-like faces? Where does that come into the Pokemon?
I was thinking more because you guys see those weird faces in the
I mean, those are Pokemon faces. Those are not gnome-like.
Not
but...
Well, it's big hidden faces.
Okay.
I think I'm also struggling with like if the cave, I think one way of looking at this chapter is like if you're finding Mew could be like the goal, right? Because he talks about this mysterious 151. That's kind of like what everybody's trying to find. It's very elusive. And so if you find Mew in the cave, it almost seems backwards, then that would be your starting point for the solve. Like if this hotel was the end, which I guess it could be, but then where's the treasure?
Private
I feel
property.
like, and I feel like that it's going to be out in nature too, like more remote.
All right.
It almost seems backwards.
I mean,
Blake, what do you think?
the 6-story is nice. 6-story hotel is nice. It definitely bolsters it if true. Have you tried to reconcile that, I guess, with your own research? Or
No,
is that,
I've
that's
not.
just
I'm
what the
reporting
Reddit-
directly off the post.
Okay, okay. I'd be
There's
curious.
pictures for everything else, but the expanded from originally being 6 stories is I'm taking their word for it off
Okay.
the post.
Yeah, I mean, if that were identifiable fairly easily online, then I would, if it's local knowledge that you can't research yourself, I'd be more skeptical. But anyway, I think it's very interesting connections there. Very interesting.
Yeah, especially that floor. The floor got me.
Right. Cool. That's a great one, Cody. Thank you.
Don't thank me. Thank Flashy-grapefruit 785.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Flashy Grapefruit. Coincidence of the day. Bryn, what's your coincidence of the day?
Coincidence of the day, also on Pokemon theme. So I had downloaded Pokemon Go a few weeks ago at this point to get a little bit familiar with the UI. I had not played before. Wanted to see what kind of lingo was used in the UI that maybe shows up in the chapter. And one of the first things I noticed is when you launch the app, there's a launch screen. I think it comes up every time. I don't think it rotates. But there's a specific launch screen that comes up as the game's loading. And the scene that's shown in this, it's like kind of like the augmented reality, a real location with the Pokemon in this location. But the location itself looks exactly like the boardwalk in our Memorial Park Houston solve.
Oh,
So if you have that image to pull up, like I
sure.
think that'll help illustrate. If you remember from our Memorial Park Houston solve,
Oh, wow.
there was a boardwalk in the wetlands area, which had a lot of other identifiable things that lined up with the chapter. But it had this like center part that was a marshy wetland area that matched up with the shape of Froaky's belly in the book. Which this boardwalk really does as well. It's kind of almost like a raindrop, teardrop shape, which I thought was very coincidental. And maybe makes me realize that that shape is not as novel as I thought it was in Memorial Park. Because to be clear, this is not the Memorial Park. This is a different boardwalk, but very, very similar.
Yeah. Nice coincidence. I think we are all in agreement that the Pokemon Go connection has to be pretty light, if any, because that is changeable, right? So they could change this login screen, which I know this is why you're making it a coincidence of the day. But for more deeper solves that are using Pokemon Go, like looking for gym locations, looking for specific Pokemon that are in the app, that just makes me so nervous that that app can be updated at any time and then that clue is gone. So I know I'm not putting too much stock into the inner workings of Pokemon Go. I like your approaches, Bryn, of taking concepts from there, candy or the different Pokeballs.
The reliability rating.
Well, reliability,
I mean, that's like a
yep.
direct reference, but I think it's maybe just for that alone to help tie in the Pokemon Go thread with the rest of the chapter but not necessarily tied to a solve.
Yeah, that does look eerily similar to the Memorial Park solve.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, should we dive into the main chapter content for today, covering There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins-Black, chapter Postscript and Acknowledgements. You guys ready? Do you want me to do a summary of the postscript, or do you want to just talk about certain components of that? I think there's a lot of good information in here.
I mean, let's just say the postscript is also referred to as the safety chapter.
That's what, yeah, I've been calling the safety chapter.
Yeah, so this is basically Jon Collins-Black's instructions for just like keeping safe in the hunt. He's kind of outlining some rules to help keep us safe as hunters and help protect private property, all that type of stuff. So he's just kind of giving some hard boundaries and rules to the hunt itself. And he makes it very clear that there's no clues or deceit hidden in this chapter. So that being said, I still think there's a lot that we can take from this, even if they're not necessarily clues.
Yeah, I do want to be very clear up front because it is a safety chapter. And we kind of we're in a weird position where like with our write and email address, we kind of have we have a view of some people who you can tell are like get pretty carried away with things, or get the confirmation bias can get pretty extreme. So I want to make sure, as we're talking about this, we're not looking for any hidden meanings in this chapter.
Right.
There's stuff we can get from it, but it's stuff like it's not on private property. Important to know it's in the safety chapter, but we're not trying to shift things around and find hidden messages. We're not trying to ignore any of the things that he says here, or come up with any sort of reason why there's any sort of gray area, because there's no gray area. He makes it very clear, things that you should not be doing and things that aren't safe, and gives some recommendations on how to stay safe. And those things that he says supersede anything that we say.
Right. But there is straightforward information that is super helpful in this chapter.
Yes.
That I think we should be highlighting here today is my goal.
Exactly. Yes, I agree.
All right. So yeah, I'll emphasize Jon Collins-Black says there is no subterfuge, no double meanings, no misdirection, no innuendos, no subtext, no code, no clues in this chapter, or just these 2 pages, I guess. None of the 5 treasures are in dangerous places, and so there's no danger that you should be undertaking arriving to the box or at the location of the box itself. And he defines that a little bit further. Not near a swift current or a high or dangerous ledge. None of the treasures are hidden underwater. You do not need to get in a raft, canoe, or water vessel of any kind. And in front of that, a little bit higher up, he says, you should take what I say here as literally as possible. So, what do you guys think about taking a ferry?
I think if there's an alternate method of getting somewhere, a reasonable alternate method of getting somewhere, but then it's fair game. I think if the only way to get somewhere is a ferry, not out of bounds.
Out of bounds, because you should take what I say here as literally as possible, which we would be doing by listening to that.
But if you have like an island that like has a bridge, but from the other side there's a ferry,
right?
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I also think that it's not going to be anywhere that you need to like pay to get to. Like, yes, I understand people are paying a lot of money to fly across the country to look for these, but it's like you don't have to be. Like, you should be able to drive to these locations, get to them without having to pay money, if that's available to you.
Is
I
that just
also,
that's just your gut feeling?
yeah, that's just my gut feeling. Like you wouldn't have to
Okay.
pay to get on a ferry to get to a location. But like
Okay.
you don't have to.
I mean,
I guess maybe it.
I agree with you, and that's my gut feeling too. I just want to make sure we differentiate between what he's saying word for word in here and what is more our our expectation.
Yes, that is
Mhm.
my expectation. Um, I also want to go up to the list of what he's saying. There's none of this, none of that.
Mhm.
So like no subtext, no clues, no double meanings, no misdirection, no code. Does that kind of give us a list of things that he has done in the book? And if so, no misdirection. Is he intentionally misdirecting us at other points in the book? I think is what I took from this.
Yeah,
Or is he just probably maybe just really doubling down on I'm not doing any misdirection here.
right,
Yeah,
right.
that's
No, that definitely was a tickler to me. Are these the approaches he took throughout the rest of the book? I just don't think there's enough evidence here yet until we get a solve for a box to kind of understand his clue making approaches for all of these things yet. So, but I certainly honed in on that as like interesting double meanings. Let's look for that a bit more. Not that we haven't been already, but yeah, is this a laundry list of things we should be looking for? I don't know. Don't scale any rock face or cliff to find any box. It will be impossible to find any of the 5 treasure boxes if there is a blanket of snow covering the ground.
I want to pause on that one
Okay.
because I feel like people are taking that as all the boxes must be hidden where they could be covered in snow in the winter. And I'm very much in the camp of this does not mean they're all in a location that could be snowy. I just think that's a fact. Like if they're covered in snow, you're not going to find them. It doesn't mean one's not in Florida. It won't be covered in snow, but if it happened to ever be, you're not going to find it. So that is my personal interpretation. I think some people have maybe taken that too literally as far as these are all in areas that could have snow.
You should take
agreed.
what I say here as literally as possible.
But that's what
Sorry,
you say,
you can-
literally as possible. You're not going to find them if they're covered in snow. It doesn't
Right.
mean that they will be covered in snow.
Right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you can take it literally and still have Bryn's point be true.
Yes. Agree. Wear bright visible colors if you are searching in areas where hunting is taking place. Again, safety.
Sorry
Yeah.
to keep pausing.
No, that's
But-
just what we're doing.
To me, the bell that rang was for the Appalachian footpath. Maybe that is indicating hunting ground because we had the hunting dog go fetch, like to fetch a bird. I don't know. That was the only like hunting reference I could really be thinking of.
Yeah,
So
I think he's
just my commentary there.
I think he's just covering
Yes,
ground
but-
there that people might be searching in places where hunting is taking place. So make sure you're safe, being safe and being visible in those locations.
I guess I'm not trying to make clues out of things.
No,
I'm just saying maybe hunting was top of mind because of something like that.
Okay. Search with a friend or loved one when possible, because it's more safe and it's more fun. Avoid have a picnic. Avoid going on private property. No box is hidden on private property of any kind, and there is no need to walk through private property of any kind. The only exception I can think of would be the rare case where a public trail crosses private land for a short ways, and where the section has been given a public easement, granting trail walkers permission to travel across. What do you think of that?
I think
I'm taking it literally.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, I don't have too much. That just seems straightforward to me. Like he was just thinking of every scenario. Yeah, and if you're going to be on a trail, maybe thinking of the Appalachian Trail, like
Mhm.
that's cutting through a lot of the country, and there's
Right.
going to be a lot of specific scenarios that happen with the trail.
No treasure is buried under the ground. How about under a rock?
Under lots of rocks. Under our gravel.
Research the wildlife in the area that you are searching. The odds of having contact with wildlife is low, but be prepared. If you're aware of people ignoring these rules, please intervene. The other point he makes is nobody else has any information on the location of the boxes besides Jon Collins-Black. So don't reach out to family members or things like that because they don't have any pertinent information towards the location of the boxes. And then he mentions yeah, go ahead.
A note that I had was, I think when he was talking about searching with a friend, it was like bring your cell phones or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to check to see if we think, does that mean these boxes would be hidden somewhere with cell service? Would it be intentional to not hide them somewhere where you wouldn't have cell service?
Yeah, I think it's too difficult to speculate on that in this chapter.
It's also too difficult for him to take 6 different phones with 6 different carriers and check for everyone to make sure everyone has cell service, I would think.
Yeah,
Unless it's just obvious that it's like somewhere very close to a city or something.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it'd be tough to check because there's more than one carrier.
Then he closes this postscript out saying these rules are not meant to discourage, but really just to keep you safe. The point of the treasure hunt is to be fun, invigorating, scenic, and pleasurable. And it should bring you joy every step of the way. So that basically sums up the main key takeaways in terms of quote unquote the safety chapter here. Anything I missed that you guys wanted to highlight?
I interrupted with all of my tidbits.
No, that's good. So yeah, I recommend everybody review this chapter. I think there is useful tidbits in there.
Wasn't this also the chapter where he said it's no more than 3 miles off any road?
Yes. That's one thing I wrote down, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important for like things that we can be taking away from this. Him saying any road, I guess I would take that as like a logging road, any road that I guess you could get to, any road.
Yeah,
sure?
I'd say if an off-road car can get to it, I'd count it as a road. I think. Yeah, the 3 miles one's in here. I have it on my notes.
Okay, I'll try to find it because I don't remember that part.
It's the second to last paragraph on 239, the first page.
All right, second to last paragraph.
There is no treasure hidden more than 3 miles from any road.
Sorry, I totally skipped over that. My fault. Yeah, that is a key piece of information, certainly. All right.
I'm an as the crow flies guy on the 3 miles.
Really?
I am. I feel pretty strongly about it too. I'm surprised that so many people don't feel differently, I guess.
I get why you feel strongly about that, and it makes sense, but like I guess you'd have to be mapping it out before you get there. And I just think the practical sense of it is he wants to make sure you're not hiking for miles and miles off road. And the way that you'd be tracking that is the trail that you're on.
Mm-hmm.
I just think the practical application of it as a safety measure would be like, you don't need to go on an extremely long hike to get to this location.
Right.
Because I think the intent of it is for safety, not for narrowing down locations as like a tool. if that makes sense.
No, what you're saying makes sense. I'm not convinced for some reason. And I don't know exactly why, but I just have this really strong feeling that it's just, maybe it's, I think I
That's
can think
as
of too many,
literally
like,
as possible. That's fine.
yeah, I guess I'm taking it as literally as possible. And it's,
And
I don't know, I
there's
feel like I can think of a lot of weird edge cases where it's like, what if you have a main trail, but then some like small little bushwhack trail off, and which one are you counting? And unless it's, I don't know. I just like, as the crow flies, you go onto like Google Maps, you put in your coordinates, you go draw your measure distance to the road, and it's less than 3 miles.
yeah, there's no rule here that this has to be off of a trail or on a trail somewhere. So I kind of like your point. All right. Do you guys have information about the quotes on the next page by chance?
I have a little bit.
Okay. Can you start talking about that while I use the restroom real quick? I can still hear you, so I'll commentate when I get back.
All right. Well, hopefully we can't hear you. All right. 3 quotes on the following page. The first one's by Eddie Cantor. It says, "Slow down and enjoy life. It's not only the scenery you miss by going too fast, you also miss the sense of where you are going and why." And I just realized the 2 is misspelled. It's T-O, too fast, T-O fast, instead of T-O-O fast.
Oh,
Interesting.
boy.
I wonder if that's, I guess he probably said it, not wrote it, but that would be a typo. Eddie Cantor, known as Banjo Eyes, American comedian, actor, dancer, singer, songwriter, film producer, screenwriter, and author. Cantor was one of the most prominent entertainers of his era. Second quote is by Mother Teresa. "Profound joy of the heart is like a magnet that indicates the path of life." And everyone, I think most people know who Mother Teresa is. She's the Michael Jordan of being a good person.
Wow, nice pull there.
Thank you. She's an Albanian Indian Catholic nun, founder of the Missionaries of Charity, and is a Catholic saint. And she's the first person who I'm not even going to attempt to say her original name. It's just all consonants and the little squiggly lines and stuff. And I wouldn't even know where to start if I tried to pronounce it. And then the final of the 3 quotes following the section we're just reading is, "We need joy as we need air. We need love as we need water. We need each other as we need the earth we share," by Maya Angelou. Another one that a lot of people probably just know off the top of their head. Maya Angelou was an American memoirist, poet, and civil rights activist. Now back to you, Blake.
So, did you guys like the magnet part of that quote by chance?
Yeah, so the magnet really jumped out to me. I mean, as like compass, connection, direction. I thought magnet was strong, and then I also liked the last quote. "We need joy as we need air," because we've had all these like air, bird's eye view, aviation connections as well. So I guess those 2, I would say they're all joy quotes. This first one is enjoy. But the second 2 are the ones that stood out to me as like hasty little clues.
Okay. Agreed. You have any other nuggets out of those quotes, Cody?
No, I don't think so. I actually got I've been like very interested in the quotes and the authors of the quotes throughout the book. And I feel like over the last couple episodes, I'm getting a little disenchanted with that idea, actually. And I think that having 3 quotes in a row at the end, and I couldn't really tie a lot of connections between those people and other stuff in the book. And I don't know, I was getting a little disenchanted, and it's starting to feel a little bit like my version of Bryn with the torn edges of things that ended up all being Shutterstock stuff, where like, this is like, I'm just going to find some library that's just like
The
a library
edges.
of famous joy quotes. And they're just like all going to be like listed in the top 100. It's starting to feel like that kind of thing.
I have to make it clear, I still believe the torn edges around the item photography is still in play.
Mhm.
And I believe it's going to be critical as we make our mural, as we construct our mural. We need these shapes.
To weave our mural.
It's all
I
about
just
perspective.
I don't want people to think that I've discredited those outlines.
No. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I apologize.
I take my outlines very seriously. Well, I got a lot of notes out of the acknowledgements.
Really?
Oh boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you lead that section if you don't mind?
All right. So he starts out, I'm assuming the first people that he's thanking are his researchers. He
Mhm.
lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think he said he had 5 researchers. And he says researching the histories. These are the researchers.
I think his sorry to interrupt, but I think his requirements for hiring researchers was just that they had cool names.
He referred to their researching as a Herculean effort.
Nice.
So
I caught that too, yeah.
That felt like a clue. And he also ended that paragraph with, "You gave me the ammunition with which to write." Ammunition felt like an interesting word choice there. It makes sense. I get it. But I think there's other things that probably would have come to mind first if I wasn't trying to use the acknowledgement sections to hide clues as the author. So I think there's something there. The next paragraph, thank you to Jamie Biver, who was the photographer of all these pieces. Very few people, well, I guess that's not true. I was gonna say he doesn't use too many last names, but he does where it, I guess, is significant or makes sense to be using last names. One interesting thing I found about this photographer is he in his portfolio has a ton of like Hollywood movie posters. And so I was trying to think through, like, first of all, this is a very successful, prominent photographer, I'm assuming, if he's doing all of this like Hollywood work. And so I would think it's maybe someone that Jon Collins-Black was like aware of and wanted to like personally hire for this project since he had the means to do so. And so I thought, well, maybe he's aware of his work through these movie posters. And that's could be like some sort of movie tie since we have a few different like movie connections throughout. So I didn't know if there would be any connections to some of the movie posters that he has photographed. One that stood out that I thought you would like, Blake, is the Bee movie.
Why do you think
he landing on a pistol?
Oh, the Bee movie. Classic Bee landing on a pistol content right there.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Exactly.
I do like
but
that.
It was like shocking how many movie posters he's done. Jon Collins-Black called out his photography making the items come to light or come alive, which kind of reminded me of talking about the boxes in almost like a human way as far as being born, the final resting spots of the boxes. So again, just kind of like personifying these pieces of the hunt. What else? And you guys please add anything. I kind of just have scattered notes here, hopefully in order. I wrote down locate my North Star.
Yeah, that was my FFPN for this section, my number 1. Thank you, Johanna, for helping me locate my North Star. Felt interesting. A lot of celestial stuff we've been talking about recently. Felt like interesting phrasing.
He talked about the editor, Don. Oh, Don. Don's hand steering the ship, marking a path. So, hand theme. And theme shows up. Steering the ship seems significant. I mean, this is a treasure book, and we do have the ships, and I can't remember which chapter that was, but the gold shipwreck chapter, and mark a path, which also feels very significant as we try to build out this roadmap.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And then I'm trying to see who this was about. Sorry, I didn't put enough context in my quotes, but wrote hit the lottery. There's
That's
someone.
Richard.
Is that on page
Second page.
243?
Yeah, 243,
Oh, yeah.
first paragraph.
Yeah, so the designer. Hit the lottery seemed weird. Would you guys say hit the lottery? I would say won the lottery or hit the jackpot.
That's a good point. I didn't think about
It
that.
it didn't seem weird when I first read it. And even when you mentioned that it's weird, it didn't seem weird. And then now that you said the other two ways of saying it, it kind of seems like maybe it's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I just reread it. And I think you wouldn't say I hit the lottery. I hit the jackpot.
I don't know. I think you would. Now I'm going back and forth. I don't think it's particularly weird. I really hit the lottery with that one.
And I mean, I guess
feel like I've heard
regardless,
that
I don't know
before.
what you would make out of it.
Right.
Maybe I'm trying too hard to make things out of the acknowledgement section. But it seemed like fair game because like things like North Star and like some of these things are just very much like legit. They have to be clues.
Did you anagram any of these paragraphs, Bryn?
I did not. I did not go that far. He talks about his parents. And I think it was something along the lines of, I hope I can be like half the parent that you were, something like that. Which is just a nice line. But didn't we have some sort of connection or tie with half throughout the book?
5 and half.
We had 5 and half. Maybe I was thinking of the pairs. Yeah, I don't know. I thought half. Maybe I was thinking of dozen. I know we were making dozen connections.
Yeah, bunch of duality stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm probably forcing half the parent. Lifts me up on wings. Again, back to like aviation, bird's eye view, 36,000 feet. Glowing faces lit a path. I think that was talking about his kids. Yeah, your glowing faces lit a path for all this to be possible, which kind of felt like the moon to me.
I'm ready for you to say that your hot take is that all the clues for the book are just in the acknowledgements.
No. But I guess we do have like that kind of illumination theme that we also felt like was very strong between the introduction and Joy's serenade as well. So with the path, we need to figure out our roadmap again for solving this. Feed joy. About his wife. You feed joy to my life every day. I don't know. Again, maybe just forcing things. Felt a little suspect to say feed joy. I have 2 other. Oh no, what happened to my? I had a big mic drop. I don't know what happened to it. I'll say one more thing and then I'm going to Google it again. Okay. The last thing I'll say is that after the acknowledgements, it switches back to like kind of the, I don't know, we call it the final page in a book. It switches back to white and it's just kind of like a placeholder filler page. Mm-hmm. And it has that pick and shovel icon again.
Right.
Which I cannot stand because he's telling us not to dig, not to do things that are dangerous. And that icon drives me nuts.
Do you have any other nuggets out of that, Cody?
No, the only one out of all of them I actually wrote down was the locate my North Star one.
Okay.
But I agree with a lot of those. I agree with everything Bryn says and fully endorse her opinions.
I do too.
Okay. I found my most exciting note.
Oh boy, you really hyped this up.
So I think this is funny because all along we've realized there is a significance to page numbers. And that we think that he's like formatted things certain ways to make the page numbers line up in certain ways. He's removed page 90. And I keep thinking back, I think it was our interview with him. He like casually said something like, this is like a 240 something page book. Like he didn't want to say 243 page book. Like, and I think it was very, very obvious and very clear that he knows exactly that it is 243 pages because so I've been doing a lot of number research. I'm not a number person, but I have gotten into some high level number work for my Pokemon box assessment. So I will say, I'm going to say some words. I don't know what one of these words is, but I'm just going to say it.
Did he touch his glasses when he said 200 and some? Because that's supposedly the tell for when he's nervous or lying.
The number 243 is significant because it's the only 3-digit number that is a 5th power 5 theme, a perfect totient number, and the sum of 5 consecutive prime numbers, 41, 43, 47, 53, and 59.
Okay.
So it's like a very math-heavy, significant, I don't know, maybe all numbers kind of have weird connections like this. But the fact that it has these, especially the 5th power connection with all the 5s that we're seeing in the book, I felt like there's a very intentional use or a very intentional purpose of making this exactly 243 pages.
That's cool.
Does anybody know what a totient number is?
No. Totient. How do you spell that?
Totiient.
I've got unfortunate news for you, Bryn.
Oh no, what?
Which is unfortunate because I really like what you were thinking there. And I dig all the number talk. But I just pulled up the old Apple Books version where part 2 is taken out of the lion's share. And it renumbers all the pages after part 2. So that it's got like as not even just like the Apple page number, but the actual like picture page number for the last page of the book is 211.
Interesting. That could be an oversight because the ebooks were a last minute thing.
It could be.
But is the Apple ebook reformatted somehow differently? The numbers on the pages are changed, or is it screenshots of the pages and it was edited?
It's photos of the pages, so the page numbers would have been edited.
Okay. Interesting.
And I'm guessing, I'll double check, but I'm almost positive that, let's see here, as it hits part 2, I'm sure it's just going to jump in page numbers.
My big mic drop moment.
I wouldn't discount it still.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah. I mean, the whole ebook thing was so hasty that I guess I'm not totally out, but that's discouraging.
Yeah, I'm going to look at the publisher's ebook version. I don't want to pull it up now because we'll cover the screen, but after this, I'll check that out and let you know. I looked up what a totient number is, and I have no idea what any of this means. So further deep dive is needed, I think.
I mean, if it's that complex, I don't think that's what he's getting at here. But I think there could be something with prime numbers.
Okay.
Like maybe those page numbers 41, 43, 47, 53, maybe there's some thread between those. I think people understand prime numbers. Or maybe something with 5th power. I mean,
I like that a lot. Yeah.
I think there's like other more common number crunching that could be significant to 243.
What's the 5th power of 3? Yes,
do the math.
3.
Get my Wolfram Alpha out.
Blake, did you say what the definition of I want to say topiary, but I think that's a
Yeah,
hedge, right?
yeah. It was extremely clear since you missed it. A totient number is the context of Euler's totient function, also known as the phi function, is a value m for which there exists at least one integer n such that Euler's totient function equals m.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
Really?
you missed it. I said I have no idea what any of this means, so that one is.
So
heard
maybe
of-
we let that component go.
I've heard of Euler before. That's
I've
about
heard of
as
Euler too, but I don't know
far
any
as I'm
context.
getting.
Yes.
I have not heard of Euler. So, yeah, I don't know. That's all I have. I guess that all being said, I found way more in the acknowledgement section than I would have expected. And I
Yeah.
think if I were him, I probably would have made an intentional effort to just like take some other clue themes from the book and sprinkle them in just for the sake of it, because he has said you can find clues anywhere in this book. And I think it's kind of just like a nice little touch if you're making a treasure hunt book to take an effort to include clues wherever you can.
Mhm.
Yeah, you bet.
Cool. Excellent work, everybody. Any parting thoughts, or should we wrap this up?
I think we can wrap it up.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode. Have a good night.
Searching for clues